internet, the web, as we know it, the kind of web things that we're all talking about, is only less than 5,000 days old. Okay? So all the things that we've seen come about, starting, say, with satellite images of the whole Earth, which we couldn't even imagine happening before, all these things rolling into our lives, just this abundance of things that are right before us, sitting in front of our laptop or our desktop, this kind of cornucopia of stuff just coming on, never ending, is amazing. And we're not amazed. It's really amazing that all this stuff is here. Okay? It's in 5,000 days. All this stuff has come. And I know that 10 years ago, if I had told you that this was all coming, you would have said that that's impossible. That's simply, there's no economic model that would be possible. And if I told you it was all coming for free, you would say this is simply, you're dreaming, you're a Californian utopian, you're a wild-eyed optimist, and yet it's here. The other thing that we know about it was that 10 years ago, as I looked at what even Wired was talking about, we thought it was going to be TV but better. That was the model. That was what everybody was suggesting was going to be coming. And it turns out that that's not what it was. First of all, it was impossible, and it's not what it was. And so one of the things that I think we're learning, if you think about like Wikipedia, it's something that was simply impossible. It's impossible in theory, but possible in practice. And if you take all these things that are impossible, I think one of the things that we're learning from this era, from this last decade, is that we have to get good at believing in the impossible, because we're unprepared for it. So I'm curious about what's going to happen in the next 5,000 days. If that's happened in the last 5,000 days, what's going to happen in the next 5,000 days? So I have kind of a simple story, and it suggests that what we want to think about is this thing that we're making, this thing that's happened in 5,000 days, that's all these computers, all these handhelds, all these cell phones, all these laptops, all the servers. Basically, what we're getting out of all these connections is we're getting one machine. That there is only one machine. And our little handhelds and devices are actually just little windows into those machines, but that we're basically constructing a single global machine. And so I began to think about that, and it turned out that this machine happens to be the most reliable machine we've ever made. I mean, it has not crashed, it's running uninterrupted. And there's almost no other machine that we've ever made that runs the number of hours, the number of days, 5,000 days without interruption. That's just unbelievable. Of course, the internet is longer than just 5,000 days. The web's only 5,000 days. So I was trying to basically make measurements. What are the dimensions of this machine? And I started off by calculating how many billions of clicks there are all around the globe on all the computers. And there's 100 billion clicks per day. And there's 55 trillion links between all the web pages of the world. And so I began thinking more about other kinds of dimensions, and I made a quick list, and it was Chris Jordan, the photographer, talking about numbers being so large that they're meaningless. Well, here's a list of them. They're hard to tell, but there's 1 billion PC chips on the internet. If you count all the chips and all the computers on the internet, there's 2 million emails per second. So it's a very big number. These are just a huge machine. It uses 5% of the global electricity on the planet. So here's the specifications, just as if you were to make up a spec sheet for it. 170 quadrillion transistors, 55 trillion links, emails running at 2 megahertz itself, 31 kilohertz text messaging, 246 exabyte storage. That's a big disk. That's a lot of storage, memory, 9 exabyte RAM, and the total traffic on this is running at 7 terabytes per second. Brewster was saying the Library of Congress was about 20 terabytes. So every second, half of the Library of Congress is swooshing around in this machine. It's a big machine. So I did something else. I figured out 100 billion clicks per day. 55 trillion links is almost the same as the number of synapses in your brain. A quadrillion transistors is almost the same as the number of neurons in your brain. So to a first approximation, we have these things, 20 petahertz synapse firings. Of course, the memory is just really huge. But to a first approximation, the size of this machine is the size in complexity, so it is kind of to your brain. because, in fact, that's how your brain works in kind of the same way that the web is work. However, your brain isn't doubling every 2 years. So, if we say this machine right now that we've made is about 1 HB, 1 human brain, if we look at the rate that this is increasing, in 30 years from now, there'll be 6 billion HBs. So by the year 2040, the total processing of this machine will exceed the total processing power of humanity in raw bits and stuff. And this is, I think, where Ray Kurzweil and others get this little chart saying that we're going to cross. So what about that? Well, here's a couple things. I think I have three kind of general things I would like to say, three consequences of this. First, that we're basically what this machine is doing is embodying, we're giving it a body. And that's what we're going to do in the next 5,000 days. We're going to give this machine a body. And then the second thing is we're going to restructure its architecture. And thirdly, we're going to become completely codependent upon it. So let me go through those three things. First of all, we have all these things in our hands. We think they're all separate devices. But in fact, every screen in the world is looking into the one machine. These are all basically portals into that one machine. The second thing is that some people call this the cloud. And you're kind of touching the cloud with this. And so in some ways, all you really need is a cloud book. And the cloud book doesn't have any storage. It's wireless. It's always connected. There's many things about it. It becomes very simple. And basically what you're doing is you're just touching the machine. You're touching the cloud, and you're going to compute that way. So the machine is computing. And in some ways, it's sort of back to the kind of old idea of centralized computing. But everything, all the cameras and the microphones and the sensors and cars and everything is connected to this machine. And everything will go through the web. And we're seeing that already with, say, phones. Right now, phones don't go through the web, but they are beginning to, and they will. And if you imagine what, say, just as an example, what Google Lab has in terms of the experiments of Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, blah, 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 all these things are going to become web-based. They're going through the machine. And I'm suggesting that every bit will be owned by the web. Right now, it's not. If you do spreadsheets and things at work, a Word document, they aren't on the web, but they are going to be. They're going to be part of this machine. They're going to speak the web language. They're going to talk to the machine. The web is, in some sense, kind of like a black hole that's sucking up everything into it. And so everything will be part of the web. So every item, every artifact that we make will have embedded in it some little sliver of webness and connection, and it will be part of this machine. So our environment, kind of in the ubiquitous computing sense, their environment becomes the web. Everything is connected. Now, with RFDs and other things, whatever the technology is, it doesn't really matter. The point is that everything will have embedded in it some sense of connecting it to the machine. And so we have basically an Internet of Things. So you begin to think of a shoe as a chip with heels and a car as a chip with wheels. Because basically most of the cost of manufacturing cars is the embedded intelligence and electronics in it, not the materials. A lot of people think about the new economy as something that was going to be a disembodied, alternative virtual existence, and that they would have the old economy of atoms. But in fact, what the new economy really is the marriage of those two, where we embed the information and the digital nature of things into the material world. That's what we're looking forward to. That is where we're going. This union, this convergence of the atomic and the digital. And so one of the consequences of that, I believe, is that we have this sort of spectrum of media right now, TV, film, video, that basically becomes one media platform. And while there's many differences, that in some senses they will share more and more in common with each other. So the laws of media, such as the fact that copies have no value, the values in the uncopyable things, the immediacy, the authentication, the personalization, that media wants to be liquid, that's really what you really want. The reason why things are free is so that you can manipulate them, not so that they are free as in beer, but free as in freedom. And the network effects rule, meaning that the more you have, the more you get. The first fax machine, the person who bought the first fax machine was an idiot because there was nobody to fax to. But he or she became an evangelist, recruiting others to get the fax machines because it made their purchase more valuable. Those are the effects that we're going to see. Attention is a currency. So those laws are going to kind of spread throughout all media. And the other thing about this embodiment is that there's kind of what I call the McLuhan reversal. McLuhan was saying machines are the extensions of the human senses, and I'm saying humans are now going to be the extended senses of the machine in a certain sense. So we have a trillion eyes and ears and touches through our digital photographs and cameras, and we see that in things like Flickr, where, or Photosynth, this program from Microsoft that will allow you to assemble a view of a touristy place from the thousands of tourist snapshots of it. It's, in a certain sense, the machine is seeing through the pixels of individual cameras. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about was this idea of restructuring, that what the web is doing is restructuring. And I have to warn you that what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to give my explanation of a term you're hearing, which is a semantic web. So first of all, the first stage that we've seen in computers of the internet was that it was going to link computers, and that's what we called the net. That was the internet of nets. And we saw that where you have all the computers of the world, and if you remember, it was a kind of a green screen with cursors, and there was not much to do. If you wanted to connect it, you connected from one computer to another computer. And what you had to do is, if you wanted to participate in this, you had to share packets of information. So you were forwarding on. You didn't have control. It wasn't like a telephone system where you had control of the line. You had to share packets. The second stage that we're in now is the idea of linking pages. So in the old one, if I wanted to go onto an airline web page, I went from my computer to an FTP site to another airline computer. Now we have pages. The unit has been resolved into pages. So one page links to another page. And if I want to go into book a flight, I go into the airline's flight page, the website of the airline, and I'm linking to that page. And what we're sharing were links. So you had to be kind of open with links. You couldn't deny, if someone wanted to link to you, you couldn't stop them. You had to participate in this idea of opening up your pages to be linked by anybody. So that's what we were doing. We're now entering to the third stage, which is what I'm talking about. And that is where we link the data. So I don't know what the name of this thing is. I'm calling it the one machine. But we're linking data. So we're going from machine to machine, to page, and now data to data. So the difference is that rather than linking from page to page, we're actually going to link from one idea on a page to another idea rather than to the other page. And so every idea is basically being supported, or every item, or every noun is being supported by the entire web. It's being resolved at the level of items or ideas, or words, if you want. So this is physically coming out, again, into this idea that it's not just virtual, it's actually going out to things. So something will resolve down to the information about a particular person. So every person will have a unique ID, every item will have a something. They'll be very specific, and will link to a specific representation of that idea or item. So now, in this new one, when I would link to it, I would link to my particular flight, my particular seat. And so, give me an example of this thing. I live in Pacifica. Rather than right now, Pacifica is just sort of a name on the web somewhere. The web doesn't know that that is actually a town, and that's a specific town that I live in, but that's what we're going to be talking about. It's going to link directly to, it will know. The web will be able to read itself and know that that actually is a place, and that whenever they sees that word Pacifica, it knows that it actually has a place, longitude, certain population. So here are some of the technical terms, all three-letter things that you'll see a lot more of. All these things are about enabling this idea of linking to the data. So here, I'll give you one kind of an example. There's a gabillion social sites on the web. Each time you go to there, you have to tell it again who you are and all your friends are. Why should you be doing that? You should just do that once, and it should know who all your friends are. So that's what you want, is all your friends are identified, and you should just carry these relationships around. All this data about you should just be conveyed, and you should do it once, and that's all that should happen. And you should have all the networks of all the relationships between those pieces of data. That's what we're moving into, where it sort of knows these things down to that level. Semantic web, Web 3.0, giant global graph. We're kind of trying out what we want to call this thing. But what it's doing is it's sharing data. So you have to be open to having your data shared, which is a much bigger step than just sharing your web page or your computer. And all these things that are going to be on this are not just pages. They are things. Everything we described, every artifact or place will be a specific representation, will have a specific character that can be linked to directly. So we have this database of things. And so there's actually a fourth thing that we have not get to, we won't see in the next 10 years or 5,000 days, but I think that's where we're going to, and that is the Internet of Things, where I'm linking directly to the particular things of my seat on the plane, that physical thing becomes part of the web. And so we are in the middle of this thing that's completely linked down to every object in the little sliver of connection that it has. So the last thing I want to talk about is this idea that we're going to be codependent. It's always going to be there. And the closer it is, the better. If you allow Google to, it will tell you your search history. And I found out by looking at it that I search most at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I am open and I'm being transparent to that. And I think total personalization in this new world will require total transparency. That is going to be the price. If you want to have total personalization, you have to be totally transparent. Google, I can't remember my phone number, I'll just ask Google. We're kind of so dependent on this that I have not gotten to the point where I don't even try to remember things, I'll just Google it. It's easier to do that. And we kind of object at first saying, oh, that's awful, but if we think about the dependency that we have on this other technology called the alphabet and writing, we're totally dependent on it. It's transformed culture. We cannot imagine ourselves without the alphabet and writing. And so in the same way, we're going to not imagine ourselves without this other machine being there. And what is happening, what this is some kind of AI, but it's not the AI in conscious AI, it's as being an expert. And Larry Page told me that that's what they're trying to do, and that's what they're trying to do. But when 6 billion humans are Googling, who's searching who? It goes both ways. So we are the web. That's what this thing is. We are going to be the machine. So the next 5,000 days, it's not going to be the web and only better. It's just like it wasn't TV and only better. It's not going to, the next 5,000 days is not just going to be the web, but only better. It's going to be something different. And I think it's going to be smarter. They'll have an intelligence in there that's not, again, conscious, but it'll anticipate what we're doing in a good sense. Secondly, it's become much more personalized. It will know us, and that's good. And again, the price of that will be transparency. And thirdly, it's going to become more ubiquitous in terms of filling our entire environment, and that we will be in the middle of it. And all these devices will be portals into that. So the single idea that I wanted to leave with you is that we have to begin to think about this as not just the web only better, but a new kind of stage in this development. It looks more global. If you take this whole thing, it is a very big machine, very reliable machine, more reliable than its parts. But we could also think about it as kind of a large organism. And so we might respond to it more as if this was a whole system, more as if this wasn't a large organism that we are going to be interacting with. It's a one, and I don't know what else to call it than the one. We'll have a better word for it, but there's a unity of some sort that's starting to emerge. And again, I don't want to talk about consciousness, I want to talk about just as if it was like a little bacteria or a Volvox, which is what that organism is. So, to do, action, takeaway. So, here's what I would say. There's only one machine, and the web is its OS. All screens look into the one. No bits will live outside the web. To share is to gain. Let the one read it. It's going to be machine readable. You want to make something that the machine can read. And the one is us. We are in the one. I appreciate your time. Wow.